I discovered my husband's affair on our wedding anniversary. My Christmas Eve revenge made them both pay the price. I was preparing a perfect 7-year anniversary dinner for my husband, Marcus, in our comfortable suburban home outside Atlanta, with his favorite herb-crusted lamb chops. I had to visit 3 different markets just to find the right ingredients: duck fat roasted potatoes and an expensive bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon. I was wearing the emerald silk dress Marcus always said made my brown eyes look like gemstones, and I filled the house with the romantic glow of carefully placed candles and the scent of rosemary and hope. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me rewind a little and tell you exactly who I became. The woman standing in this suburban Atlanta kitchen, swallowing humiliation behind a perfect smile, trying to be the right kind of wife for Marcus. 7 years ago, I thought I'd hit the jackpot when Marcus proposed. We met in college. I was a dreamy literature student, working part-time in event planning to pay tuition. He was a promising software engineer, confident, charming in the way of a man who knows exactly what he wants. He pursued me with weekend trips to Lake Adirondacks, red roses delivered to my dorm, dinners at restaurants I'd never dared to imagine. He made me feel like I was the only woman in the world who mattered. 6 months later, he proposed by the lake under a sky full of stars. A year after that, we married. A wedding he orchestrated perfectly. Guests, mostly his coworkers and family, paid for by his family as well. I should have noticed the signs then, but I was young, 23 to his 28, and I mistook his control for deep love, his possessiveness for protection. The changes started small. Gentle suggestions slowly turned into firm opinions, then into unspoken rules. That dress is a bit short for my company party. Your friend is fun, but she doesn't really fit our lifestyle. Event planning is nice, but now you're my wife. You don't need to be running around anymore. We don't need your income. And honestly, Ara, planning birthdays or corporate parties isn't a real career. That came 8 months after the wedding. I had just been promoted to senior event coordinator at one of Atlanta's best boutique firms. I loved that job. The creativity, the problem solving, the satisfaction of watching a flawless event come together. But Marcus turned quitting into a privilege, into an upgrade. Stay home, he said. Take care of the house. Be my wife. Isn't that what you wanted? I wanted to be a good wife. I wanted him to be proud of me. So I quit. Now, 7 years later, I spend my days in this beautiful house. Beautiful the way Marcus wants it. Gray, white, beige, minimalist, expensive. I used to love color. Wine red, forest green, warm yellow. But Marcus said they were gaudy and cheap. I redecorated, reorganized, hosted dinner parties for his colleagues and their wives. The wives were always polite but distant. They talked about work, lawyers, doctors, fund managers, then turned to me and asked what I did, and I had to say, I'm a homemaker. Their expressions shifted. Pity or judgment, I wasn't sure. Marcus comes home late most nights now. Working late, he says, never explaining what project needs him until 9 or 10. I learned not to ask. The one time I did, his voice went cold. Not angry exactly, but warning. Do you think this lifestyle just appears out of nowhere? This house, this car, your credit card? Someone has to do real work. So I stopped asking. Instead, I became the perfect wife. I learned to have dinner ready whenever he walked through the door. I learned to keep the house spotless, like a magazine spread. I learned to dress the way he liked. I learned to smile and nod at corporate parties, while the other wives talked about lawsuits, stocks, market trends. I learned to shrink, smaller and smaller. Tonight was supposed to be different. Today was our wedding anniversary, and I wanted to do something special. I spent the entire afternoon preparing my husband's favorite meal. I set the table with our wedding china, the set his parents gave us, white with gold trim. I lit the candles and opened a bottle of wine. But what I never expected was that this day would be burned into my memory forever, with the sharp clarity that only psychological trauma can bring, as I stood in my meticulously prepared kitchen, listening to Marcus hum in the shower while his phone kept vibrating nonstop. The messages from VH, lighting up Marcus's screen were not casual exchanges between distant acquaintances, but intimate conversations between two lovers who had been having an affair for 6 months. Victoria Hawthorne wrote about how she couldn't stop thinking about last weekend and asked, "When can I see you again?" while demanding to know whether Marcus had told her yet about his plan to leave his wife for his former college girlfriend, the one who had kept up the appearance of friendship while methodically dismantling my marriage. As I scrolled through months of messages, a picture of calculated deception emerged, one in which Marcus had used my emotional vulnerability after my second miscarriage to justify delaying his departure, while promising Victoria that the one I want has always been you. The intimate photos of Victoria in lingerie and hotel rooms, along with pictures of the two of them together at Beltline Bistro, taken just a week earlier, proved that Marcus had been openly dating his mistress in public while maintaining the image of a devoted husband. The sound of the shower shutting off, and the moment Marcus stepped out with a towel wrapped around his waist, wearing the familiar smile that had made me fall in love with him at 23, marked a complete shift in my perception of the man to whom I had given my heart and my future. His casual kiss, "Happy anniversary, baby," brushed against my cheek, now felt as cold as ice on my skin, and I forced myself to stay steady instead of pushing him away. 7 years of life together had taught me that confronting him right now would only bring temporary satisfaction, while careful planning could deliver lasting justice, forcing both Marcus and Victoria to be held accountable for their choices. When dinner was over, Marcus spoke to me in a completely calm tone, as if he were suggesting adding another dish to the menu. He wanted to invite Victoria over for Christmas Eve dinner. She was having a hard time, he said. She would be alone for the holidays. Family is about sharing, isn't it, baby? I stood by the sink, still holding the dish towel, and nodded without asking a single question. In my mind, every word fell back into its proper place. This wasn't a request, it was an assumption. That I would agree. That I would open the door. That I would keep playing the role of the generous wife while he tested what it felt like to have both women sitting at the same table. I said, "Okay." I said we should be more compassionate during the holidays. I said Christmas was a time to practice charity. Marcus smiled in relief, the kind of smile of someone who believes everything is firmly under control. He didn't realize that my agreement was not surrender. It was the first step of a schedule that had been planned with great care. 1 week after I discovered the truth, I spent my time meticulously documenting Marcus's financial misconduct against our marriage. I created a disposable email account to store the evidence, while carefully reviewing credit card statements that revealed a pattern of expensive spending on hotels, restaurants, and jewelry to fund his relationship with Victoria using money that belonged to our shared marital assets. I hired Sam, a former Chicago police officer turned private investigator who specializes in infidelity cases. He met me at a small suburban cafe, wearing a worn leather jacket, his eyes sharp as razor blades. I handed him everything I had: screenshots of messages, credit card statements, call logs. Sam nodded, his voice low and professional. "This isn't just a simple affair, Ms. Ara. He's living two completely separate lives, one as a devoted husband to you, the other as a man promising a future to her. He's using joint funds to bankroll this relationship, and he's lying to you about everything: his intentions, his emotions, his plans." Then Sam showed me a post on Victoria's private Facebook account. A diamond ring resting on the palm of her hand, the lighting perfectly staged, with the caption, "He finally proposed! I can't believe I'm about to marry my best friend. Cheers to a new beginning." No name, no face, no trace leading back to Marcus. I sat there, staring at the ring on Sam's laptop screen, a chill running down my spine. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew this relationship could never come into the light, and she chose to continue anyway. Sam's investigation didn't stop there. He dug into Victoria's professional background, a licensed marriage therapist who made a living teaching honesty, boundaries, and healthy relationships. And then he uncovered the detail that made every piece fall into place in the most chilling way. Victoria was publicly engaged to another man. Dr. Alex Ramos, a pediatric surgeon, wealthy, respected. The proposal had taken place in August, in front of family, friends, lights, and congratulations. While in another hidden corner, she was still whispering to Marcus about their future. Victoria accepted both. One public. Alex provided status, money, an elite life. One secret. Marcus offered nostalgic passion, emotional validation from their college past. She was collecting fiancés like trophies, playing both men at the same time, calculating every move to extract the maximum benefit from each. Sam looked at me, his voice low. She thinks she's smarter than everyone, but greed like this is always the biggest weakness. When these two men learn the truth, she'll lose everything. I sat there, my hand tightening around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, the initial chill now transforming into something sharper, stronger. Victoria thought she was manipulating everyone. She thought her professional reputation, built on ethics, honesty, and healthy relationships, would shield her forever. She was wrong, and I would be the one to show her that. That evening, Marcus came home earlier than usual, around 8 o'clock. He was in an unusually good mood, whistling as he hung his coat on the hook. I had to use every ounce of strength not to react, not to let the mask slip. "Good day?" I asked, my hand still stirring the pasta sauce bubbling on the stove. "Great day. I closed a big deal." The boss was full of praise. He stepped up behind me and kissed the top of my head. A month ago, that gesture would have made me happy. Now it just made my skin crawl. "Your favorite dish. You really are amazing, Ara." He poured himself a glass of wine. Then he poured one for me too. "How about we go Christmas shopping this weekend? Get something really nice for Victoria. What do you think? Maybe a scarf, something elegant?" I tightened my grip on the wooden spoon. He wanted me to help choose a gift for his mistress. "Sounds lovely," I heard myself say, my voice sweet. "A cashmere scarf, maybe. Very tasteful. Perfect." He beamed. "See? I knew you'd be mature about this. You're always so generous." We ate dinner, and Marcus actually talked to me about work, about the contract he'd just signed, about plans for next year. Almost like the old days, except now I knew it was all an act. He was soothing me, making sure I stayed compliant, making sure I wouldn't object to Victoria being there on Christmas Eve. I smiled, nodded, asked the right questions. While inside, I counted the hours until he fell asleep. 11:30, he finally went to bed. I waited another half hour, listening to his familiar, steady breathing. Then I carried my laptop into the bathroom, closed the door, sat on the edge of the tub. My hands shook as I logged into the anonymous Proton Mail account. The first email I sent to Alex Ramos was written slowly and precisely. No emotion, no accusations, just facts. I attached photos of Marcus and Victoria kissing at Beltline Bistro, Marriott hotel receipts, screenshots of messages where she referred to her on-call nights that lined up perfectly with the evenings Marcus told me he had to work late. The subject line said only, "You deserve to know the truth about your fiancé." I didn't ask Alex to believe me. I simply gave him enough data to draw his own conclusions. My finger hovered over the send button. This was it, the point of no return. Once I sent it, I would set things in motion that I could no longer control. Alex Ramos could ignore it, could show it to Victoria, could do anything that might ruin the plan. But I thought of Marcus's smug smile, his calm cruelty, the way he told me to behave properly. I thought of the messages where he called me weak, harmless, easy to manage. I hit send. The email vanished into the digital void, and I sat there staring at the screen, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I closed the laptop, went back to bed, carefully slipping under the covers so I wouldn't wake Marcus. He didn't stir. I lay there in the dark, eyes wide open, wondering if I had just made a terrible mistake. The next morning, as soon as Marcus left for work, I checked the anonymous account. Nothing. An hour later, I checked again. Still nothing. By noon, I was convinced Alex Ramos had deleted the email, or assumed it was a scam, or simply didn't care. Then, at 1:30 in the afternoon, my laptop chimed with a new message. Who is this? How do you have this information? My hands shook as I opened it. The email was short, sharp, exactly what you'd expect from a powerful man being told an uncomfortable truth. I had already prepared a response with Sam. I attached more evidence: screenshots of Marcus and Victoria's messages, hotel invoices, several surveillance photos Sam had taken. My message was brief. Everything I said is true. Look at the evidence. If you need more, I can provide it. I sent it before I could hesitate. An hour passed, then another. I tried to distract myself by cleaning the house, cooking, anything to keep my hands busy. But my mind kept circling back to that email, wondering what Alex Ramos was doing with the information I'd given him. At 4 in the afternoon, another message appeared. I confronted her. She denied everything, said I was lying, said I was some crazy person trying to cause trouble. Who are you? I had expected this. Victoria was smart, a skilled manipulator. Of course she denied it. This was the moment of decision. I had to reveal myself. I took a deep breath and typed, I am Ara, Marcus Hudson's wife. We've been married 7 years, living in the suburbs of Atlanta. Everything I told you is true. Victoria is playing both of us. My husband has invited her to Christmas dinner at my house. He thinks I don't know about the affair, thinks I'm too weak to notice. But I know everything. Marcus reacted exactly as I expected. Angry, threatening, wanting to handle it quickly. I understood that impulse, but I called him, the longest phone call I've ever had with a stranger, and convinced him that violence only brings momentary satisfaction. What we wanted was real justice, public humiliation, career destruction, and letting both of them watch their house of cards collapse on its own. This was my proposal. We give them exactly what they want: a warm, cozy Christmas dinner. Everyone sitting at the same table. Let's see how Victoria holds up when she's exposed in front of everyone. There was a moment of silence. Then his voice dropped lower. I want that. I'll be there. What do you need me to do? I listened, almost unable to believe what I was hearing. Alex Ramos, a successful, wealthy pediatric surgeon, agreed to help me expose my husband and his mistress. I collapsed into a chair, my legs trembling. Sam had been right. Men like Alex Ramos cannot tolerate being manipulated. His ego would never allow Victoria to play him for a fool. I replied immediately, Come to my house on Christmas night at 6:30. I'll text you when it's time exactly, and bring any evidence you've gathered. I hung up and sat there in my kitchen, surrounded by the carefully curated trappings of my life, feeling something shift inside me. I was no longer alone. I had an ally. I had a plan. And in 1 week, Marcus and Victoria would learn what happens when you underestimate the weak, harmless wife. Over the next week, Alex and I exchanged dozens of encrypted emails, coordinating every detail of Christmas night. The correspondence was cold, professional. Two betrayed people working together to make the deceivers pay. Alex sent me the evidence he had gathered: videos from the proposal, records of dates, wedding plans for the following year. He was building a case to completely destroy her with the ruthless efficiency of a top surgeon. Meanwhile, at home, I continued playing the perfect wife. It was strangely easy, maybe because I knew there was an end date. Christmas, 6:30 p.m. After that, everything would be different. Marcus mentioned Victoria constantly. Victoria advised him on which stocks to invest in. Victoria suggested which wine to buy. Before, each mention felt like a knife. Now it was just confirmation that I was doing the right thing. 2 days before Christmas, Marcus actually took me shopping for Victoria's gift. We went to a luxury boutique in Buckhead, where he chose an expensive light gray cashmere scarf. What do you think? He asked, holding it up. Elegant enough? I stood there in the designer store, helping my husband pick out a gift for his mistress. and he saw nothing wrong with it. "It's beautiful," I said. "She'll love it." He grinned. That day, Marcus was unusually cheerful. He bought me an expensive pearl necklace, a Christmas gift to make up for all the late nights. He hummed softly while wrapping presents, secretly texting Victoria right there in the kitchen while I stood 3 steps away, pretending not to see the screen light up. He thought he was winning big. A dutiful wife at home, a mistress moving closer, a perfect plan to leave me without losing anything. He bought gifts for both women with joint money, smiling smugly every time he thought about Christmas dinner, where he would sit between them, enjoying the power of the manipulator. He had no idea that every message, every call, every expense had already been recorded, and that the biggest Christmas gift this year wasn't anything wrapped in red paper, but the collapse of everything he thought he had so perfectly arranged. Christmas Eve arrived painfully slowly, as if every minute were deliberately stretching itself out to test my patience. I didn't wear the familiar festive colors. I chose a deep red outfit, not cheerful red, but a dark, rich shade, the kind of color that doesn't ask permission to be noticed. I stood in front of the mirror for a long moment, adjusting the shoulders, taking a deep breath. This wasn't something Marcus ever liked, and that was exactly why it was perfect. Lauren arrived early with her husband and kids. She hugged me longer than usual, as if she sensed something tightening in the air. I smiled, poured wine for everyone, made the usual small talk, kept my voice steady. The presence of Lauren, Ara's sister, and her family provided both emotional support and witnesses to what was about to unfold, ensuring that Marcus would not be able to minimize or deny the events that would take place in front of people he valued, and whose testimony could later confirm tonight's revelations if legal proceedings required it. Marcus came out of the bedroom around 5:50, wearing a green cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my weekly pay from my old job. His hair was neatly styled, expensive cologne lingering subtly. He barely acknowledged Lauren and her family. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Marcus," Lauren replied, her tone carefully neutral. I saw her jaw tighten, the way she gripped her wineglass harder. She was already angry for me, without even knowing what was coming. At exactly 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Marcus practically jumped out of his chair. I stayed in the kitchen, one hand resting on the cold stone counter, listening to his hurried footsteps toward the door. His voice floated back, warmly intimate in a way I hadn't received in a long time. "Victoria, you're here," a woman's voice answered, light, confident. "Of course, it's Christmas." I smoothed my dress, flattened a crease that wasn't there, and walked into the living room. Victoria stood there exactly as I'd seen in the photos. Tall, slim, carefully polished from her hair to her shoes. She wore designer clothes and carried an expensive bottle of wine, like a peace offering. She hugged Marcus, just a beat too long, her hand resting on his back for an extra breath. I saw it. Lauren saw it too. Victoria turned to me, her smile opening just warm enough, just inquisitive enough. "You must be Ara. Thank you for inviting me." "Of course," I said, taking her coat. "Marcus talks about you a lot." The words slipped out lightly, and I caught Victoria's eyes flicking over me, the dress, my posture, my face, searching for signs of suspicion or jealousy. She found none. I'd practiced this for too long. I hung up her coat and turned back to see Marcus and Victoria, already deep in conversation about something work-related. Lauren watched them with undisguised disgust. "Shall we sit down for dinner?" I suggested brightly. Everyone moved to the table. Marcus pulled out a chair for Victoria, a gesture he hadn't done for me in years. I began serving the courses, moving between the kitchen and dining room with the practiced ease of someone who had hosted dozens of flawless dinners. Victoria studied the table setting, offered praise in a tone that was polite enough, superior enough. "Everything looks lovely, Ara. You're very skilled." Very skilled. In the kitchen. The contempt was subtle but unmistakable. talented in the kitchen, as if that were the height of my abilities, as if cooking were the only value I brought. "Thank you," I replied smoothly. "I've had a lot of practice." Marcus had already started cutting into the meat, not bothering to wait for everyone to be served. Victoria watched him with clear amusement, an inside joke I wasn't part of. Lauren stayed silent, her fork hovering over her plate, eyes darting between Marcus and Victoria like she was watching a tennis match. "So, Ara?" Victoria said, sipping her wine. "Marcus said you used to work in event planning." There it was, the opening shot. She knew exactly what she was doing. "That's right," I replied, taking my seat. "Before we got married." "Oh, how fun!" Her enthusiasm was fake. "What kind of events? Kids' birthdays, corporate parties, that sort of thing?" Marcus actually laughed. A short, dismissive sound that made my grip tighten around my wineglass. Lauren's fork clinked sharply against her plate. "She organized major corporate events," Lauren snapped. "Product launches, charity fundraisers. She was a senior coordinator at the best boutique firm in Atlanta." Victoria's smile didn't falter. "Impressive. But you quit after you got married." "Marcus and I decided it made more sense for me to focus on the household," I said, repeating the lie I'd practiced for years. "Of course," Victoria replied, her tone carrying something extra, pity mixed with self-importance. "Not everyone is suited for high-pressure careers. Some people are better suited to domestic life." The table fell silent. Even Marcus sensed it had gone too far and cleared his throat, shifting the topic. Victoria talked about her work, the pressures of her profession, dealing with liars in marriage counseling, why people seek what they lack at home. Marcus nodded along eagerly, his eyes never leaving her, occasionally touching her hand with an ease that needed no concealment. He sat there, delighted, convinced he'd arranged everything perfectly. 2 women, 1 table, and no one daring to disrupt the script he'd written. Lauren stayed quiet. I saw her jaw clench, her hand tighten around her glass. I continued playing the perfect host, passing bread, refilling wine, asking just enough questions to keep Victoria talking, and revealing herself. She didn't realize that every word, every example, every moral lesson was being carefully noted. Marcus laughed loudly, leaning toward her as she spoke. He was treating her the way he used to treat me, attentive, engaged, genuinely interested. When was the last time he asked about my day? When was the last time he looked at me with that kind of interest? I poured more wine, cleared plates, brought out the next course. The perfect host, the invisible wife. "You know what I love about Atlanta?" Victoria said, accepting another glass. "The energy here. New York is great for a career, but it never felt like home. Not like here." She glanced at Marcus. "This is where I belong." The implication was clear. "This is where we belong," Marcus said warmly. "I'm glad you came back." "Me too," Victoria said softly, and the intimacy of the exchange made my stomach twist. Lauren suddenly stood up. She needed the restroom. I watched her leave, her shoulders rigid. As she passed behind Marcus's chair, I saw her whisper to me, "What the hell is this?" I excused myself to check on dessert in the kitchen. My hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally cracking the calm I'd been holding together. I gripped the counter, breathing slowly. Through the doorway, I could still hear Victoria's voice dominating the conversation. She was reminiscing about a college weekend trip with Marcus to some lake. "Remember that stupid canoe race?" They were creating their own world at my dining table, reliving shared memories I wasn't part of. When I returned to the dining room, Victoria was showing Marcus something on her phone. Their heads were close together. She was laughing about something. They didn't even notice us come back. I sat down and forced myself to eat a few bites of food that now tasted like cardboard. My whole body was tense, coiled, waiting. 6:20. Victoria was talking about her new apartment, bought with our money. "You have to come see it, Marcus. The view is amazing. I'm on the 40th floor, overlooking the lake." "I'd love to," Marcus replied immediately. a blatant invitation. She was inviting my husband to her place right in front of me, without a trace of shame, because she thought I didn't matter. She thought I was too weak, too passive, too well trained to object. 6:22. You know, Victoria said, leaning back with her wine, this has been such a lovely evening, Ara. Really? Marcus was right. You're very generous. Generous. That was Marcus's word for me. Generous, agreeable, easy to manage. 6:23. I stood up. Before dessert, I said, I have a surprise. Marcus looked up, mildly curious. A surprise? Yes. I walked toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. You said we should make this Christmas special, so I invited a few more guests. Victoria's eyes narrowed just slightly, but I caught it. She was smart enough to sense danger, even if she couldn't yet identify its source. The doorbell rang at exactly 6:30. Not a minute early, not a minute late. I opened the door, and Alex Ramos stood in the hallway, tall and commanding in a dark wool coat. His expression was pure fury, jaw clenched, eyes cold as stone. I stepped aside to let him in. The moment Victoria saw him, all the color drained from her face. Her fork clattered onto the porcelain plate with a sharp clang, red wine splashing across the white tablecloth like blood. What are you doing here? She whispered, her voice breaking at the end. The carefully polished confidence on her face shattered almost instantly, exposing the raw panic of someone who had just realized the two worlds she had so carefully kept separate were colliding, right in front of people who were never supposed to see. Marcus shot to his feet, his chair crashing backward. Ara, what the hell is this? Who is this? I closed the door behind Alex with a soft click that echoed in the sudden silence. Sit down, Marcus, I said calmly. We're just getting started. Lauren had already pulled out her phone and started recording, her eyes wide. I gestured toward Alex as if introducing an ordinary guest. Everyone, this is Dr. Alex Ramos, a well-known pediatric surgeon in Atlanta, and more importantly, Victoria's fiancé. The room exploded from there. Marcus's face went from confusion to deathly pale. Victoria? Fiancé? He repeated, his voice cracking. Alex stepped fully inside, arms crossed, his expression carved from stone. And this, he said in a dangerously low voice, must be Marcus, the clingy ex Victoria claimed she had gently broken things off with long ago. Silence. No one spoke. I saw Marcus swallow hard. I saw Alex's jaw tighten, and I saw very clearly the moment the two men looked at each other, then at Victoria, and realized just how thoroughly they had been played. A woman who treated their emotions, their commitments, as tools for advancement, not something sacred deserving respect. I turned on the TV mounted beside the dining table. The screen lit up, and the room was instantly flooded with images that needed no narration. Marcus and Victoria, hotels, kisses, messages blown up large, every word unmistakably clear, lifelong promises, future plans, sentences that erased my existence, as if I had never been his wife. No one could explain. There was nowhere left to deny. Marcus stared at the screen as if he couldn't believe it. Ara, where did you get all this? I hired a private investigator, I replied simply. But that's not all, I said, switching to a new folder. Because Victoria wasn't only sleeping with you, Marcus. New images appeared. Victoria and Alex at an upscale restaurant, his hand holding hers across the table. A clear timestamp. This was November 8th, the night you said you were working late. Another image. Victoria returning home at 11 p.m., then leaving again at 2 in the morning. She slept with Alex. That day, I was lying in a hospital bed, I said, as the room remained thick with silence. Bleeding, alone, my second miscarriage. I didn't look at Marcus when I continued. And you were at a restaurant, with her. The words landed softly, but I saw exactly how they shattered the last remaining defenses. Whatever might once have been called an affair no longer had language sufficient to disguise it. Marcus looked at Victoria, and I saw something break in his eyes. She had seen him as nothing more than emotional entertainment while waiting for Alex, the one who brought money and status. He had destroyed his marriage for a woman who treated him like a disposable toy. Victoria jumped up, her chair toppling over. "You're all beneath me," she snarled, the perfect facade completely gone. "Marcus, you're pathetic, clinging to the fantasy we'd end up together like lovesick teenagers. You were just a stepping stone, a warm body when Alex was busy." She turned to Alex, her tone shifting instantly. "You're the one I need." Marcus stood there, pale, like someone waking from a long dream and realizing he had traded everything for something that never existed. "I was never going to marry you," Victoria continued, no longer hiding it. "You were just easy." Any remaining sympathy died right there. I didn't need to say another word. Victoria laughed bitterly. "You're all just jealous. Jealous because I'm smarter, more ambitious, willing to do whatever it takes to succeed. Marcus is weak, so he was easy to manipulate. Alex is arrogant, so he was easy to deceive. And Ara," she turned to me, eyes full of contempt, "you were easy because you're weak." "Really?" I asked quietly. "Do you see a weak wife who arranged this entire evening, gathered all the evidence, found another one of your victims and convinced him to cooperate? I planned every minute. Is that weak, Victoria?" She had no answer. I walked over to the Christmas tree and took a small gift box I had hidden there that morning. Inside were the divorce papers my lawyer had prepared the week before. I placed the small box in front of Marcus. "Your Christmas gift," I said. Inside were the divorce filings and a court order demanding full financial disclosure. Every expense, every shared dollar used to fund this relationship. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. A few days later, formal ethics complaints were filed. Every document, every piece of evidence sent to exactly the right places. Victoria's career, built on lectures about boundaries and honesty, began to collapse in the same way she had inflicted on others. The evening ended faster than I expected. Victoria left in a panic. Marcus was escorted outside by Lauren's husband, a police officer. The door closed. My house fell quiet again. I stood in the dining room, looking at the untouched table, the candles still burning, and for the first time in a very long while, I knew with absolute clarity that there were people who would never cross this threshold again. The divorce took exactly 6 months. There were no noisy courtroom scenes or public displays of tears. My lawyer, Vivian, worked quietly and precisely, putting every account, every investment, every line of money back where it belonged. When it was over, the house was mine. The bank accounts and investments were mine as well. Marcus left with a single suitcase of clothes and moved into a small studio apartment, not as punishment, but as an honest reflection of the real value of what he had brought into the marriage, once everything was stripped of lies. The professional board's investigation followed a different path, slower, but no less final. When Victoria's license was revoked, I didn't feel triumph. I felt the long silence of a career that had once been built on lectures about ethics, boundaries, and honesty, the very things she had systematically violated. What she lost didn't come from me, but from the standards she herself had claimed to uphold. Victoria left Atlanta and returned to Tampa to live with her mother. No job, no reputation, no parties or admiring glances. Just a life reduced to the point where she could no longer hide behind titles. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to know more. Some endings close themselves when no one wants to keep watching. Alex needed time to heal. We stayed in touch, not because of the past, but out of respect between two people who had seen the truth at the same time. Later, he told me he had met someone else, someone direct, without games, without masks. I was happy for him, not because of new love, but because he had learned to choose based on character rather than a carefully constructed role. I began to write. At first, just scattered notes, then a manuscript. I titled the memoir, My Beautiful Vengeance, not to tell a revenge story, but to speak about the moment a woman stops being silent and starts thinking strategically. The book was published, and it was mentioned more than I expected. The emails I received didn't ask how to hurt someone else. They asked how to protect themselves. And that was when I understood. Justice isn't shouting in a crowded room. Sometimes it's patiently collecting the truth, placing it exactly where it belongs, and stepping into another life, one where you no longer have to explain why you deserve respect. I was no longer the woman trembling at the dinner table, swallowing words to keep everything from collapsing. I didn't become someone else in a single explosive moment either. The change came more quietly. On the day I understood that I didn't need to wait for anyone to save me, and I didn't need permission to protect myself. I didn't get over betrayal with emotion. I walked through it with clarity. When everything ended, I realized one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't just a victim of what Marcus and Victoria did. I was the one who gathered the truth, preserved it intact, and placed it where it belonged. Agency wasn't something given to me. It was something I deliberately took, with documentation, legal knowledge, and carefully built alliances. People who are used to benefiting from others' silence often mistake calmness for weakness. I let them believe that long enough. My backyard garden bloomed in spring. Deep red roses, soft petals, sharp thorns. I cared for them with hands that once shook, and I realized there was no contradiction in that. Gentleness and strength are not opposites. They coexist, in the balance required to keep opening your heart without putting yourself in danger again. I still stay in touch with Sam. Not out of fear, but because I understand that trust doesn't mean closing your eyes. Preparation isn't pathological suspicion, it's intelligent self-care. I learned that the people who keep families running, who clean up the messes, who know the most carefully hidden secrets, are often the most underestimated. Marcus tried to break my will. He forgot that I was the one who held everything together long enough to see the entire structure, and to know exactly where it would collapse. If there's one lesson I carry with me, it's this. Betrayal can destroy you, or it can forge you into your own protector. Emotional confrontation only releases tension for a moment. Truth that's documented and placed correctly stays. My story doesn't exist to encourage anyone to hurt others, but to remind us that silence is not an obligation, and that exposure, when done right, can end behaviors that only survive in the dark. I didn't become a symbol. I simply became myself, for the first time, without shrinking so others could feel comfortable, and that is enough.